Okay, so excellent. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. We are so excited and proud to have this amazing panel with us this morning for the Day of Indigenous Unity. I'm going to move my toolbar out of the way. Those of us watching online, you can watch live at midheaven.network as well as on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram Live. So we're going to get started. We do have interpretation running today. So if you are in need of interpretation, this is how you can set it up from your computer. You would come down and click on the interpretation button and then click the language which you would like to hear. Today we have English and Spanish available. So if you want to hear only the interpreted language, you can then hit mute for the original audio, or to hear for bilingual participants, you can hear the original language only. So we'll put this up in Spanish, and if we could have either Blanca or Sandra explain this in Spanish, that would be wonderful. Thank you. We have no Spanish yet. Okay. Maria, would you be able to help us out and go through the interpretation in Spanish?
Yeah, sure. Ahora sí que escuchamos en español. Ok. Voy a explicar un poco, un momentito sobre cómo los participantes podrían escuchar la interpretación en español. En los controles de su webinar tienen que hacer clic en el botón que es interpretación. Y aquí tienen que hacer clic en el idioma que le gustaría escuchar. Hay dos idiomas hoy, inglés y español, entonces tienen que elegir el español. Si prefieren escuchar solo el idioma que está interpretando, tiene que hacer clic en la opción que se llama silenciar audio original. Pero para escuchar solo el audio original, bueno, en el caso que tenemos participantes que son bilingües, tienen que hacer clic en desactivado, la misma opción sobre silenciar audio original, tienen que elegir clic desactivado en el caso que quieren escuchar solo el audio original.
Thank you so much, Maria. And did you already go through this part of the slide, Maria? No. Okay. So from a smartphone, we'll leave this up, but instead of the interpretation button, it's the three dots. And then again, you would just pick your either original audio, which today the original audio is in English, and then this is not Italian. Sorry, my apologies, but Spanish. You would click Spanish if that's what you wanted to hear.
Y también, si hoy están conectados con su teléfono, con su celular, podrían participar y escuchar la interpretación. Tienen que encontrar en los controles de la reunión. Hay 3 puntos y la palabra más. A veces hay solo los 3 puntos, pero a veces hay también la palabra más. Tienen que hacer clic acá. Y después van a ver la opción interpretación de idiomas y después tienen que hacer clic en el idioma que gustaría escuchar. En el caso será 2 opciones, inglés y español. Y sí, de nuevo pueden silenciar el audio original. Sí, y para hacerlo tienen que hacer clic en listo.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Maria. So interpretation is turned on. So if you are in need of it, please use it. If you have any questions or you need any help throughout the day, The panelists, so our co-hosts, which you'll see in the panelist list, Emma, Maria, and Molly and Christian will be able to help you out today. So if you have a question about interpretation or just a general question for the tech side, you can message them. And if you have any questions that you would like to ask to the panelists, please submit it through the Q&A. We will be accepting questions throughout the entire hour and a half. And then we'll be going through them. We'll try to take as many as we can live, and then the ones that we're not able to answer live, we'll try to respond in the chat, or in a follow-up, we'll get to your questions. So we are so excited. I am going to start and kick things off with Winnie. So let's see, it's difficult for me to see everyone. I'm actually going to get out of my shared screen, come back to, I'm gonna stop, okay, excellent. Wonderful. So we are going to kick things off this morning with Winnie, who is in Africa from Kenya. She's joining us. I am so excited. She's going to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about what she's been doing. She's a frontline activist for climate and has been doing really amazing work. So we are so excited to have you with us this morning. Please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you everyone else for having me here. Oh, I am excited. Yeah, and it's good when Indigenous people from all over the world just meet to talk. So I'll just introduce myself. Myself is Winnie Jepto-Sengwer. I come from an Indigenous community called Sengwer Indigenous Community. Yeah. I am a land rights activist, I am a human rights defender, and my work was informed by what my community is going through. As we all are aware, maybe just in Kenya, the Sengwer Indigenous community are forest people. And so their way of life is hunting and gathering. And so what happened is the Kenyan government gazetted the ancestral home of the Indigenous community, and they were evicted from the forest and now going outside the forest. So much has happened, human rights violations have taken place, and now we've had the community's way of life changing. Yeah. And now here in Nairobi, I work at an organization known as the National Coalition of Human Rights Defenders, or where I work as an advocacy officer. So advocating for policies that are favorable to human rights defenders, working closely with Indigenous people to ensure their rights are respected, working closely now with the women. I really work closely with the women to address issues of climate change, not just the hunter-gatherer communities, but even the pastoralist communities, because we have had so many issues where women have been affected. And so we are just trying to empower women to ensure that as much as there are issues that were brought about by evictions and now climate change, we are in a position to talk to the women and now know how to combat issues of climate change. Yeah. Rebecca, do I continue from there? Yeah, I think yes. I'm done with the intro.
Oh, if you're done with your introduction, absolutely, we can move on to the next person. So I'm going to move now to Miriam. Miriam, we're going to try this out with our interpretation. So I see in our chat that the interpretation is working now. So Maria, please take it away.
Gracias, buenos días. Mi nombre es Miriam Liempe, yo soy mapuche, del pueblo Nación Mapuche, pertenezco a la comunidad Quintuquimun, que significa sabiduría, y pertenezco también, mi área de trabajo es la relación la Secretaría de Relación con Pueblos Originarios de la Central de Trabajadores de la Argentina Autónoma. Allí cumplo funciones que tienen que ver con la resolución de los conflictos, y esta área se ha especificado en estos últimos tiempos en los conflictos del pueblo mapuche sobre los territorios, pero no solo a nivel nacional, sino también a nivel internacional, ya que nuestro pueblo ocupa lo que hoy se llama Argentina y Chile. Entonces, como esta nación ha tenido varios conflictos justamente por la restitución de sus territorios, por el resguardo de sus territorios, hemos participado en alianzas estratégicas con la CUT de Chile también, que es una central de trabajadores que también se ocupa muy fuertemente y sensibiliza con la lucha indígena. Bueno, muy feliz de participar con los panelistas, con los hermanos, y saludo en este día especial.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Miriam, for that beautiful introduction. And as you can see, we're also putting our speakers' bios in the chat so that you can get a little bit more information on them. Thank you, Molly, for setting that up. That's great. And next, we're going to move to Esther. So Esther is joining us from New Mexico, and we are so honored and excited to have you here with us this morning, Esther. Please take it away and introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Esther Yazi Lewis. And then Schlido Tohit Leaning Schlido, but Ani Bashis Chain Turiji Dashiche Aro Ashche Dashinale. I just gave my clan in Navajo, and just saying that I'm from Navajo, and Navajo meaning the Na. And I work with many different things and many aspects of life in the work that I do. And the work that I do has to do with language. I speak the Navajo language, and I interpret in the Navajo language in many fields of work that I do. So that's my introduction. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Esther. And Esther and our next panelist, Strong Buffalo, are joining us from the western part of the United States. So they have woken up very early to join us. And then our panelists on the other side of the world are staying up super late to join us. So we are very honored and very excited that you are here. And last but most certainly not least, our final panelist is Strong Buffalo. So please take it away.
Oh, good morning. Miata tanka o itika, sisituan wa petuan Dakota. I'm a Strong Buffalo. I'm one of the, what they call Sioux. We're from the Northern Plains in the United States. Our territory runs from the St. Croix River in Minnesota down to Nebraska to the Rocky Mountains and Black Hills in the west, Manitoba. One of the larger American Indian nations. I think the Nez is the largest. So kind of happy to be here. I'm honored. You know, it's difficult for a few Indigenous people to speak for all of us, but it's a challenge and I'm willing to accept it. And being a poet and spoken word guy, I accept it. And I'm glad to be here, and thank you so much for including me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And to all of our panelists, thank you for your introductions. So today, the reason that we've brought everyone together, we really wanted to have a conversation with all of our Indigenous leaders that are here today about what is going on in their regions with climate. So we understand that as Indigenous folks, you are almost always at the front line defending the climate and working with non-Indigenous people. So one of the things that I'm so excited about is having a number of people from different areas. And what I was most interested in, and hopefully we can have a conversation about today, are some of the tactics and what's happening in your region, and if there's a way for us to start coordinating. Are there some tactics or some knowledge that each of you hold within your own tribes or your own areas that we can start talking about and sharing across tribes, across regions, and just, you know, as we start to understand the importance and necessity of being good stewards of this land, my belief is that that knowledge is held by our elders and by the indigenous people on this planet, and it would really behoove us to listen. So I want to give space and start talking about what it's going to take for us to move forward as a society and as people together that want to take care of the earth and make it, bring it back to a place of balance. So does anyone want to jump off? I can pick someone, but if we have any of our panelists that would like to start, my first question would be, what are you doing in your region, and what tactics have really worked to help push this idea that we need to be good stewards of the earth? So I'm gonna pick on Esther because I see her right next to me and she's smiling at me so beautifully. So Esther, what's going on in New Mexico?
Many things with
That I'm sure.
virus is number one. And I think the virus has to do with the health of the air and just in the times of our pollution with the earth, the wind, the water. Yesterday I was by a river that was coming off the northern sacred mountain of the Navajo people called the Animas River. Looking at the river and seeing the bed of the river and watching the water as it ran down the rocks and hearing the water and looking at the water, I could relate to the water because I'm a water clan. And knowing that there was a Gold Key spill, which is a hazardous wastewater that was up in the La Plata Mountain, which is the northern sacred mountain of the Navajo people. And it seems like that happened 4 years ago, going on 5 years. And still the people are suffering from not being able to farm all along the San Juan River that runs into the Grand Canyon. And it has affected a lot of Navajo farmers. And I've been hearing cases and hearing people talk about how sad and how it hurt their lifestyle not to farm anymore and not to grow crops anymore. And it was one of the staples of the Navajo people that live in the area of Shiprock and the Four Corners. And, you know, just looking there and seeing how water is so important to the people that farm. And I find it amazing when the Hopi people can farm just off the runoff of rain. But those farms have dried up too because of the climate change. We don't have the same 4 seasons that we used to have. We used to have the winter and the spring and the summer and the fall. It seems like it's warm pretty much most of the time now. And finding that the temperatures are still up in the 80s here, it's hard to understand and try to understand the people that are affected by this, the ranchers and people like that out in Navajo. Others are people who are suffering from a long period of uranium mine that has happened to Navajo people back in the 1940s, who are still fighting for their life because they were exposed and their land is exposed and they don't have the land that used to provide all the vegetation to sustain their livestock and to sustain their life. Their water is polluted and can't use the water on the land anymore. Some people are forced to move off the land. They don't have any place to go. And so those are the kind of things that I can think of. Thinking back early this morning about people up in the Navajo Hopi land dispute up in Black Mesa, Arizona, north of Monument Valley. Well, not north, but west of Monument Valley, that were affected by the relocation, and how women were always on the front lines trying to protect their land and trying to say that life has to be respected, and fought that way and have gone to the United Nations to plead their case. Those are old stories and old cases that are still prevalent today, because the fight just goes on. You know, every administration comes and it goes, and the digging of raw resources, the coal that's mined in Peabody up in Black Mesa that affected the land, and how people have struggled, and their water wells, the aquifer that they use to drink is no longer available to them. And it's just a struggle all the time. And I think people are still fighting that. And like I said, with COVID today, people are not allowed to practice their ceremonial practices. The kachinas that dance in October to bring on the winter, and to let the earth and the universe, the air and the storms that come through the winter are not welcome. There are a lot, the people that do those things haven't even had a chance to chant and bring in the winter. And I see that that's a real detriment to the way of life for the Navajo people. And there's so many things that are affected like that. And because of COVID, the medicine people can't practice their ways. Navajo people can't do their ceremonies to strengthen their spiritual ways and their life, their home, their land and livestock. And many things like that are affected. And thank you for having me be the first to speak.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for breaking the ice. I know it's always tough to be the first one. So, and I thank you for your wisdom. And we're going to come back to some of these issues, but I heard you speaking about climate change, of course, being prevalent, but also the way that this country, well, so we're international, so I won't say this country, but the United States, which is where I am located, that the United States has been going in and mining resources and not taking care of the land and poisoning the land and the water. And I imagine that in most industrialized countries, this is the way that it happens and the way that it works. So one of the things I think collectively, especially this entire group that we have that put together this panel and that we've been doing these webinars, one of the things that we're looking at are ways to interrupt that. And if there are ways that young people can start to come together with the elders and start working on these, they seem insurmountable issues, but I'm super optimistic. And one of the ways that I ended up in this space, in this circle, was working on nuclear abolition. And you also mentioned the uranium mining, which the uranium mining in Navajo land, I think a lot of people, especially here in the United States and probably around the world, don't know and understand or realize that the uranium that was used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki come from the land of the Navajo and the Hopi, well, the Navajo land. And there's a very, I think, cosmic connection between Japan and the United States and uranium and nuclear weapons and the space that we're in with weapons in general. And that type of example of an exertion of power, I think is the pinnacle example of patriarchy, of colonialism, of imperialism in the world. So when I started working on the nuclear issue and nuclear abolition, people told us we were crazy and insane. It was never going to happen. We are so close to having nuclear weapons become illegal within the next 6 months. So I am very confident that and side note, or not even side note, large note, it was mainly women that came together that were working on that. So I'm very confident with this amazing group, and definitely our wonderful allies as well, such as Strong Buffalo, and there are definitely some wonderful men in the cause, but I do think that it's going to be the Indigenous women of the world that lead us forward and help us bring balance and fix our land. So thank you for that, Esther. And I see Winnie smiling with me, and I'd like to get a perspective from another continent. So we're going to move over to Africa. And Winnie, if you could tell us what's happening in your region of the world with climate, and then also what you're able to do as far as your activism.
Okay. Thank you again, Rebecca. I think when 2020 began, fast forward March, we get COVID cases, and then lockdown comes. So in April, we had a serious locust invasion in Africa, and it was serious because they were moving in large swarms. They were eating anything, any green plant on a farm. If they land on your farm, they eat everything. I remember at that time people had planted maize, yeah, and like all the farmers lost their farm produce due to the locust invasion, and that was definitely going to lead to now hunger, because once the maize and either beans or anything else has been eaten by the locusts, people were going to suffer. Yeah, and it happened. It happened for close to 4-5 months. Yeah, and it was a terrible thing because COVID was here with us. We were in lockdown. There was no movement here at the locust, and it was crazy for everyone, especially for indigenous communities, the pastoralists that were in Laikipia. I remember one farmer was complaining that now I have lost close to like farm produce that cost him a lot of money to plant. Yeah, so that was the first case of the locust in the one effect of climate change in 2020 that we have experienced this year. Then we go to there has been a change of weather patterns in Kenya. We always know January is a hot season. We come to February, March, we start tilling farms, and then we plant in April, and then we understand our weather. We always know July is the coldest month of the year, but this year, surprisingly, the cold has moved all the way from July, August, September, and September was even colder than July. And we all believe these are the effects of climate change. And now asking ourselves, where did we go wrong as a country? What has been happening? Because once the pattern changes, even farmers do not know when to plant, because if you know that February, March, you're tilling your farms, and in April there are heavy rains and you start farming, when the rains delay and come at a later month like June, you wouldn't know how to like even plan your farming. Yeah. And then another effect of climate change that I have also experienced, and it is happening till now, even as latest as last week, we have had an increase in water levels in our local lakes. For example, there's a lake known as Lake Naivasha and Lake Baringo. I actually visited last weekend, and one of the camps that we always go to for holidays, it's known as Crayfish Camp. It has been swallowed by the water, like the water has moved now to the land, and people have lost their businesses. Some hotels have actually had to close down because water has covered until the rooftop of a hotel. So you can imagine how terrible that is. And this is the season that now people are out of lockdown, people are traveling, people are trying to just unwind, but then the water levels are crazy. The fishermen are also complaining that now the fish have moved further and fishing is a bit hard because of the increased water levels. And it is even dangerous. You wouldn't know, you might be sleeping at night and you wake up in the morning and your house is covered in water. So those are some of the effects of climate change that we have experienced in the lake regions. From my community that I come from, we experienced some landslides this year as well, and we all believe it is due to effects of climate change, people cutting down trees. We have had now some communities affected, and they have had now to move from their place that they have been living and now moving to other places. And when that happens, like I earlier said, when you move from your home to another place, you first lose your language, you lose your culture, because if today you move from point A to point B, it means when you get to point B, you have to start adapting to the way of life of the people who are in point B. So those are some of the issues that have been brought about by climate change. We've even had farmers at some pastoralists. We have communities that are pastoralists and their animals have been dying. Maybe someone has like 50 cattle, and then because there's an extended drought season, the animals cannot get food. You wake up one morning and all your animals are dead, simply because we expect rains at a certain period, but then because there has been crazy issue about changes in weather patterns, and because of climate change, such things happen. Yeah, so maybe those are some of the issues that I can highlight now, and as we go forward, I will continue giving more issues. Yeah, and maybe just to answer one question, like what have we been doing to address the issues of climate change? Personally, I've been working closely with the women, because all the time, or in all communities in a family setup, when something happens, women are the most affected. Yeah, so like for instance, going to the pastoralist communities, when there's no water, when there are no rains, what are the women doing in order to combat these issues of climate change? We have had women start doing we call double digging, where you dig and collect a lot of soil and then plant crops. By doing double digging, you ensure there's a high water retention. Oh, just a minute. Yeah, when you do double digging, it's one way of farming that helps in minerals and water retention. For it stays for up to 6 months. So it's a form of agroecology that is used for food by indigenous women. So, and it is one of, maybe we can call it one way of using traditional knowledge to combat climate change. We have had people starting adapting to alternative livelihoods. Like if we were just depending on milk products, what do we do now? What do we do as indigenous women to ensure that our families don't sleep hungry? Maybe now start making ghee, start making yogurt. So that those are some of the issues. For those people that have been affected with floods, what do they do? Maybe we have been advising them that maybe move to higher grounds, stop living in these places that are always affected by water. for the indigenous communities that live in the forest, that we feel that there could be landslides at some point, or we move them to lower grounds, or we now advise them to move from one place to another so that they are not affected by the landslides that are caused by climate change. So I think I'll stop there and maybe answer more questions as we go on. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you so much. Yes, there's so many things, Winnie, you spoke about, and I'm definitely very interested in what double digging is, and if it helps with water retention, and maybe that can even be, I don't know if the tribes here in the US know about that, and maybe that's something that we can share, because I visited the Hopi reservation over the summer, and as Esther was talking about, it was really heartbreaking to see, because they're still attempting to farm, but the crops are so small, and it's not working. And if there are ways that we can help and share information, I think that would be wonderful. But of course, we'll have to see if they already know about that, and maybe it doesn't work in that type of dirt and soil. But I think it's very fascinating. I'd love to hear more about that. But now, so we just visited Africa. We're going to come back to the US and speak to our friend in Minnesota, Strong Buffalo. So same question for you. And I imagine you and Esther are, well, Esther is in the South and you're in the Northern region. So I wonder if the issues that are happening in Hopi and Navajo areas, are those some of the same issues that you are experiencing, or is it a different set of issues completely? You know, what's going on in Minnesota and with your work?
Well, it's similar. Here, I think we have things like no DAPO, Line 3, we have fracking, a lot of spills from trains and on reservations and in the water. And we have nuclear facilities in this area. I think what's kind of in the climate change that a lot of people forget, especially when it comes to the indigenous people, is that our rights is connected to the climate. We're so close to the earth and our way of life in subsistence and hunting and gathering that the violations to us is really in the encroachment of military industrial enterprise, capitalism. The President of the United States administration has released all these environmental restrictions and limitations, and it really has affected us. I think a lot of people don't realize that American Indians, majority of us west of Mississippi have claim to a lot of the natural resources, probably 40% of the fresh water here in the United States. And, you know, strategic metals like strontium and titanium and stuff are underneath Indian reservations. And they're continuing this. And as we see in the future, that they're going for it more and they're trying to lessen it. This administration's even going after the little bit of land that they left us, and they've marginalized us so much that it's at a point where we're such a small number that a lot of people don't realize that we are the only alternative here. And in this country, if you want to stop a lot of this exploitation and pollution, and that's you can see it with, you know, how Trump jumped out of the Paris Agreement on carbon. I think the only alternative is with a lot of the American Indian people, because there is no such a thing as semi-sovereign. We are sovereigns. We're the first sovereigns here. And the Europeans and their descendants that have come here since are second in line. We're the oldest children here, and we have that right. And if you want to help the American Indians and the indigenous people survive, and we'll speak to the common people, because our names usually represent people. My people say, you know, that we're the friendly people. Ho-chunks mean people of the sacred voices, and Anishinaabe, Chippewa means like the original people. We are connected to the climate. We're the ones causing the damage, and we're the ones that have to resolve the situation. So if you look at what has been left out in the last 500 years, you'll see it's basically been the wisdom of the philosophy and the indigenous principles and worldview that needs to be included in the world to help correct it. We had a Messiah, a female Messiah that came to us called the White Buffalo Catholic woman. And she said she would return again. And when she would come back again, we would know, because there would be famine and war and hunger and going on. Weather would be going crazy. In 1994, there was the first white buffalo calf pipe in Wisconsin, buffalo born. And we found out from studies that there's a DNA defect in the North American bison now that will permanently bring white buffaloes. And so she has returned. And her advice to us then was to start talking. So we need to talk. We need more Zooms. We need more visiting. We need visitings back and forth. We've been too isolated and reserved and forgotten here in this land. And if the majority of people from around the world don't look and realize, I think there's something like 3,000 indigenous nations in 180 industrialized nations. The indigenous people need assistance. We can't survive by ourselves, but we're millions. We're the majority in the world. And unless we have the help of the people, we're not going to be able to stop this onslaught that corporations are kings and emperors, and you got politicians that think they can do anything and are doing everything. So support the people, get to know the people that are on the land, help support them to survive, because that will help change the climate, because we're in a relationship with it. It's our mother, it's the sky's our father. We're alive. We're all living beings that share the same thing. And all these things that we're ignoring, the uranium's the lungs of the earth. And so, I mean, we need to help our Mother Earth. She's crying for us to help. You can see it in the fires with the fever she has, and you can see it in her perspiration with the floods and the droughts. It's time we help her out. And so that's my advice, is go to the indigenous people. We're like the canary at the mine. You know, if we die, the world will die. And if we live, the world will survive.
So beautifully said. Thank you so much.
Thank
you. I heard you speak about a lot of things, and you seem a little teary-eyed. I'm sorry. But the understanding, there are a few things that you mentioned, some that I did not know. So thank you for teaching today. But that 40% of the water in the United States is on reservation land. And actually, with the experience I had this summer driving through reservation land, and last summer I visited the Dakota people in Minnesota, actually where you are. I had no idea just how vast the area, because when we learn about reservations, we think about them as like these small places, and we don't think about the number of people that are on them. And also, as you mentioned, because of the genocide that has happened here and around the world with Native people, there are so few numbers left. So I think as a non-Indigenous person, when we learn about reservations and about Indigenous people here, as you were saying, like what we're learning is not at all what needs to be taught. And I love that you were talking about over the last 500 years, the knowledge that's missing in the world is the Native knowledge. And I've been feeling that very deeply within my heart and soul. And one of the reasons we're all here today, the rest of the people on this panel and everyone that's brought it together, what we've been saying for the last few years is conversations. We need to start talking to each other. And I, with all of my heart, believe if we start having conversations like this more regularly, we will come to and we will find those solutions. And I love that you mentioned that Indigenous people are the majority of the world. That makes me very happy and gives me a lot of hope that we can start to bring everyone together. If that's the case, then the majority of the world has the knowledge and the will to do this. So we have to figure out how to come together and push back against a very small set of people and organizations that have a tremendous amount of power. So I'm excited, very, very, very excited to continue those conversations. So thank you, Strong Buffalo. And now we'll go to our last continent of the day. So exciting, Miriam. She's joining us from Argentina. So same question to you, and I'll talk a little slower because I know we have translation. So what's happening in Argentina as far as climate change is concerned, and how does your work contribute to the fight in combating climate change?
Bueno, buenos días otra vez. Celebrar las palabras de los hermanos que me precedieron, de la hermana Esther, del hermano Strong, de la hermana Winnie. Nosotros cuando nos reunimos celebramos las palabras porque para nosotros son sagradas, porque detrás de esas palabras están la vida de los que nos antecedieron, que es de donde venimos, ¿no? De nuestros abuelos, de nuestros antecesores. Y que este conocimiento que tenemos nosotros hoy ha sido transmitido milenariamente sobre esta tierra. Entonces, en Argentina no es diferente de lo que han descrito los hermanos en los territorios, ¿no? Sentimos el cambio climático. Mi pueblo, que es el pueblo mapuche, queda al sur de Argentina, a donde cuando yo era niña, como decía Wendy, estaban bien definidos los climas. Allí los climas en el sur de Argentina son rigurosos, cuando hace mucho frío, y cuando hace calor las temperaturas también son altas. Los otoños eran otoños y las primaveras eran primaveras. Cuando empieza el calentamiento global, empezamos a sufrir los deshielos de esa nieve, y eso trae consecuencias porque ya los pueblos no podrían juntar el agua como se juntaba antes, que se mantenía para las cosechas, y empezar a sufrir la falta de agua. Del lado de Chile, que nosotros en realidad somos un solo pueblo, del lado de Chile y Argentina, del lado de Chile se sufre más todavía porque el agua allí se vende. Ya han llegado a ese extremo. Entonces, las comunidades se han visto afectadas. Decir que el lugar donde nosotros vivimos es bello, es muy bello, tiene mucha riqueza, tiene todas las variaciones de forestación, de plantas, de árboles. He sido muy feliz cuando niña en la comunidad y he podido disfrutar de ese ambiente, de ese aire puro, de beber agua dulce, de correr libremente, y he podido sentirlo. Entonces, a veces pienso que esta humanidad va camino a que muchas personas no puedan sentir ser libre y ser felices, Por supuesto que después la consecuencia de despojo, de desarraigo, porque muchas de las consecuencias de desarraigo son porque en Argentina este Estado tiene solo 250 años y el pueblo mapuche ha resistido hasta hace 150 años. Entonces, las familias que quedaron siguen resguardando ese territorio. Es un pueblo indómito, es un pueblo que no se resigna al despojo, a la violación de esos territorios, y estamos de pie. Eso es lo que nos enseñaron los abuelos. Nosotros seguimos peleando por la tierra, porque como decía el hermano Strong, sin nosotros no hay futuro de la humanidad. ¿Y por qué lo decimos? Que parece soberbio. Como decía el hermano, somos soberanos. ¿Pero por qué? Porque en los pueblos, en la filosofía de los pueblos, está resguardada la matriz de vida de este sistema humano, de cómo vivimos. Entonces, ese es el aporte que tenemos los pueblos originarios a la humanidad. ¿Por qué? Porque la relación tan intrínseca que tenemos con la madre tierra, el resguardo que tenemos por las semillas, el resguardo que tenemos por nuestras aguas, por nuestros ríos, hace que sea un valor esencial. Esencial porque esa relación es la que permite la continuidad de la vida. Si nosotros los humanos, todos pudieran comprender esa filosofía y tener esa relación con la madre tierra, no estaríamos sufriendo lo que estamos sufriendo con el cambio climático y con las enfermedades que ha traído esta consecuencia del cambio climático. Tampoco estaríamos violando la vida de las semillas con los transgénicos, sino más bien las resguardaríamos como hacen las mujeres, que nos pasamos los conocimientos ancestralmente de esas semillas. Nosotros los pueblos tenemos ceremonias en las que el mayor, digamos, como por ejemplo el mayor título que podemos tener las mujeres indígenas dentro de nuestra cultura, es tener conocimiento de la variación de semillas que tenemos para transmitir de generación en generación y tener conocimiento de cómo se manejan las hierbas para curarnos, de todo el lagüen, como le decimos los mapuche, que es nuestra hierba, y cómo esas hierbas que están en nuestros territorios sirven para nuestra salud, sirven para nuestra alimentación. Y tenemos diferentes ceremonias en diferentes tiempos, espacios, dentro de la vida comunitaria. Entonces, hacer entender eso a un sistema que quiere patentar todo, que quiere alterar todo, como son las semillas, patentar para que nosotros, nuestras propias semillas, patentar nuestras propias semillas para que hacer renta y sacar beneficios económicos solo de ello, por supuesto que somos enemigos para ellos. Nos crean enemigos, nos hacen los estados decir que somos terroristas solo por cuidar nuestro territorio, solo por cuidar nuestras esencias, solo por cuidar nuestros conocimientos ancestrales. Pero los pueblos todavía están de pie. Hemos logrado avances en muchas leyes a nivel nacional, internacional. Hemos salido nosotros, no es que nos han regalado esas leyes, sino que los pueblos se han preocupado por salir a hacer alianzas estratégicas y hacerle entender a estos estados que nosotros tenemos alternativas a un sistema depredador. Esas leyes se han ganado con la vida de muchos hermanos que casi han dejado sus comunidades para trasladarse a las ciudades y poder hacer pactos estratégicos para que esa justicia realmente llegue a los pueblos. Entonces, en ese sentido, el cambio climático ha hecho mucho daño, no solo desde lo material, sino también del sentido espiritual que tienen los pueblos de relacionarse con su sabiduría. Por ahora, eso no sé cuál es la otra pregunta.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Miriam. So you detailed so many different things that are happening in southern Argentina right now. One of the last things that you mentioned that caught my ear was talking about how, I believe you mentioned the government, that they're making it illegal and calling your people terrorists because you're trying to care for the land, or keep your seed knowledge and things like that. Is that correct? Yes, okay. Some things like that are happening here in the United States as well with seeds. So I think that's a really important piece that we'll have to keep in our minds. And if there are ways that your community has found that you're able to protect your seeds, because I know that that's a very, very large issue, even here in the United States with like simple backyard gardens. There have been some issues even in my state with collecting rainwater. The city was saying that we were not allowed to collect our own rainwater to use in our garden because we weren't using the municipality and that we weren't paying for it. Things like that, which people fought, but I think it's crazy to hear about seeds and countries and companies and organizations trying to control seeds. But I thank you for detailing what's happening there and the close relationship that your tribe has had with seeds and herbs. I think it's really such an important aspect, and something I'm very excited to continue to talk about. I do see in our audience some people have raised hands. So if you have a question, please submit the question into the Q&A or in the chat. And if you have a technical question, then chat to one of our co-hosts. Thank you. So, all right, we are coming to, let's see, we've got about an hour left. So I'm going to do one more round of questions, but I do want to leave some time for the panelists to talk to each other. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask each other or talk to each other about, start thinking about that. I'm going to go back to Esther. And so this next question, first we talked about what's happening and some of the small things that we're doing. So now that you've had the opportunity to hear some things that are happening in other regions of the world, are there any practices that are happening in your region that you can think to share with our other panelists, or something that they mentioned that you would like to know more about? And we'll go down the line again. So it'll be, we'll go from Esther to Winnie to Strong Buffalo to Miriam again, okay? Esther, I think you're still muted.
The net people. So the woman is the head of the family, the home. It doesn't mean that the men are mistreated or anything like that. It just means that since women are the life-bearing givers of life, everybody has come from their mother, and all life is brought that way. And so we talk about climate change, and I think of Mother Earth. And when I think of the Mother Earth, I also think of Father Sky. And when I think of Father Sky, then I think of the sun, our father, and the moon, our mother. And Strong Buffalo talked about communication. And the communication was born within our life by the fact that the Navajo people, the Diné people say there was a time when things were first brought into being, created. We have the east, the south, the west, and the north. There was air that came from the east, air that came from the south and the west and the north. With the air came all the different energy and the different colors of energy. And at that time, there was a sound that came, and with it was the wind. And so making the connection of how to communicate with all that we live in, the universe, and knowing and understanding that life can only be with air, and that the sound that was made is our voice. Even the birds have their voice, even the animals have their voice, the water, the air, everything has a voice. And that this voice is a way of communicating with the universe. So when you come out and you step on Mother Earth, she feels you, and you can communicate with her, and you can communicate with the air. So that communication is an important part of how we communicate with the universe. And we say the earth, it has a balance. Like I said, the earth has Father Sky, the moon and the sun, the water and the air, the fire that's in the center of the earth, the fire that's in the heavens with the sun, the gravity that polarizes everybody to the earth. We are all a part of the universe. We're all one. And plants and trees, they're very important to how we live. That's why Navajo people farm. That's why they produce all the living things with corn, and the birds and the fish that are in the water, the air and the water. And then we got the animals of all different types, deer and bear and everything. We have all the insects, and we have all mankind that's supposed to be a stewardship of this whole universe and the earth. All living things have to have water and the sun, is the way that we were taught. I learned from my mother and father. They spoke Navajo. My first language was Navajo. I grew up on the Navajo reservation, and the reservation is not our land. The reservation is government land. We don't have land in our own land. We were here back in 1492 when Columbus came. Native Indigenous people had land, but it was the land of milk and honey to the people that came in 1492 to say, this is a land of milk and honey. Let's cut down all the trees and let's do all the, they came to kill all the animals for fur, because at that time fur was money. After that was the gold. After that was coal and natural gas and oil. And after that is uranium and so forth. It just keeps going, and it's all about money. Everything's driven by money. The more the corporate world can get money, the more they destroy what was given to us as stewardship. And so I think the communication, even Chief Seattle, who said the responsibility of Native people is the environment, the respect for land. As Indian people, we've always said that. There's so many people in my life that I've experienced by seeing women fight for the preservation of life. And we call them Balashlai, people of the earth. And so I remember when I was asked to speak on this about Roberta Blackgoat, about Catherine Smith, and these people were being forced to relocate because of a dispute that was brought on by the colonialists, the oppressors, and because of boundaries and because of Peabody, coal, and the misfortune of having to make Navajo people live off the Navajo reservation. To this day, those people still don't have land, and they've been uprooted, and they are called the forgotten people. It's not, you know, I hear my sister from Argentina talk. It's the same way, and everything is still like that here in America. She's in South America. We're in North America. Wow, what a life, you know. Indigenous people are forced to sacrifice their life, to sacrifice their language. They took our language away from us. They took our culture away from us to die, but we're still here. Like Strong Buffalo said, we're still here. One day it's going to come where, look at us today, we're sitting here and we're talking to, on a global scale, to say Indigenous people count. Indigenous people are the steward keepers of this universe. How do we communicate? And that's what I was trying to say by looking at the river, by listening to the air as it, the wind as it blows through the trees and it blows through the one blade of grass. You can hear and you can see the movement. You can hear the rhythm. You can hear these things. And that's what makes Indigenous people, if we come together from all around the world, be one, because we understand how we are a part of nature, how we are brought into this world to care for nature. It's the corporate world that want money, money, money. And the more they make money, the more things become more and more dangerous and hazardous and contaminated. And yet at the same time, they try to build another world in space for their own. So my Navajo people say, this whole cyberspace, this whole thing about internet and social media and satellites that are up in the heavens have made it complicated for them to say a prayer on our behalf for the planet, for the sun, for the moon, for the air, the water, and these things that make life for all living things like ourselves. So with Navajo people, they say that the woman is the one who carries the principles of life to teach and to show people how to walk a path of spirituality. And spirituality is a part of everything. And our life has to come back to that point in our life where we have to bring that back upon ourselves to correct. And as Navajo people say, if you ruin whatever was given to you by the creation and you somehow break it, it's scarred for life. How do you make that a complete, pristine, beautiful thing that was given to us at the beginning of time, when life was given to us, when all creation was given to us, so that we only take what we need and we allow for the rest for other people to use? Even with our time this morning, how do we, delegate our time to the next person? How are we supposed to be considerate? How are we supposed to be respectful? Those things we've taken advantage of. I grew up with no running water. We had to haul water. And just the mere fact that we saw water was so beautiful to us, because we don't have running water. We didn't have running electricity. So we had to build our fire. We had to go out and find the firewood. Just being out there in the elements of trying to find firewood was a wonderful thing. It was a great gift to understand what nature can provide for you. And that's what I have to say. I just think that these great people like Leona LaDuke and people like Roberta Blackgoat and people like Thomas Binyaka from Hopi that have gone around the world preaching about this. Here we are in the predicament of what has caused everything to fall apart. We're in a pandemic. And one of the Hopi people talk about, there's an entrance that we're all entering. And there's a big hole too, an entrance and a hole. What do they call it? A portal and a hole. So are we going to enter the portal, or are we going to fall into the hole? So we have to decide, and only the strong survive, they say. And so if you are spiritually fulfilled, I believe that, and you believe in those things, I believe that the universe will give you that entrance and that bridge to cross into that portal.
I'm gonna say, wow, Esther, everybody over here has been cheering as you've been speaking. So very, yes, super, super exciting. The portal, I'm excited about that, but it brings, you touched on so many important pieces of, I think, what I believe is broken. And coming back to spirituality and understanding women being the gatekeepers and the holders of knowledge. And one other thing that you mentioned that really resonated, just talking about capitalism and colonialism and money, and that pursuit of power. And like we were talking about in the beginning, even with nuclear weapons and all of these things that exert power and oppress other people, all of it coming back to and being, I love what you said about creating this whole other world and planet and space. And we haven't even taken care of the one that we have, and now we're trying to create this other space. I really loved that analogy. And the last part of what you were saying that really hit me was that if we were given this world and we didn't take care of it, and we broke it, we hurt it, and now it's scarred for life. And I think that that's something we also don't really consider and we don't talk about when we talk about climate change and bringing things back to balance. And even with this COVID and talking about getting back to, and it's like, no, we're not in a space, and at least within the last few hundred years, the planet is not in a place that we want to get back to. Maybe thousands of years, I don't know, but it feels like we should really be looking at creating a space where we all have this deep spiritual connection to the earth and understanding that she is our mother and we have to take care of her. So very excited to continue these conversations. And now moving over to Winnie in Africa. So same question for you. And I see you've got your mic off ready and we're running out of time, so I'm gonna be quiet.
Okay, thank you. Professor Esther has really spoken to me. Like I have really felt the presentation. So coming back to Kenya and now looking at my community, the Sengwer Indigenous community, we have been focusing so much with the women. Like we all believe that there's a saying that says, without women, the world cannot be. And I believe in it, and I hold it so dear to me, because in anything, in every societal setup, it is the women that do everything. When we want to eat food, we look at our mothers, we want food. And now going back to the contribution of women now towards this climate change, what have women been doing and what is their role? I was just looking at this issue of indigenous or traditional knowledge. All women are custodians of this traditional knowledge, and they are responsible for passing the knowledge from one generation to another. So growing up, personally, I learned from my mother that you can go to the forest, there's a tree you can pick, and it's some type of medicine. Yeah, like now we use them as herbs. There's a tree that when you peel off the bark, and there's a tree that when you peel off the bark, you can use it as a herb or something. So this role of women to pass over this traditional knowledge, to pass it over from one generation to another. Every young girl in my community knows she must have a knowledge of her medicine. Like whether you will be a doctor or not a doctor, you must know when someone has a headache, you know what type of vegetation to go get it for them. And this has grown in us. I also believe I am passing the same knowledge that I got from my mother, and she got it from her mother to the next generation. Women are also like, we trust them, and I trust that all women, even in this forum, we are supposed to protect the biodiversity. I know women have this thing with the environment. we conserve the natural resources that we have. I remember in August this year, I had a training with the women. We were focusing on SDG 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. Like, how can women ensure that there's peace in the community and they are not fighting for water points? Because the community we were focusing on is my community, the Sengwer, and getting to learn from the women, like, what are the challenges that are here? And one challenge that came out is that since people are evicted from the forest and they are now living outside the forest, there's less water points, the places they can get water. And there's the conflict always arises because people are fighting for one place where they can get water. The same place is where animals go to get their water. Then we have farmers around that place. And these farmers are using pesticides to spray their plants. And the same chemicals get into the water, and we're having people falling sick. So those are some of the issues that were coming up. Like, now what happens? What do we do to ensure there is no conflict and we are not fighting for water resources and we are not destroying the natural resources that we have? Because our role as women is to protect and conserve the biodiversity. Because I wrote here in my presentation that women are known to conserve natural resources and they play an important role in conserving biodiversity. They have a role in household activities and they influence their children. I'll share this. I was reading through and there's a statement by the 2013 UN Environment publication talking about biodiversity for the well-being of women. Like, women provide 80% of the total vegetable food collected in 135 different subsistence-based societies. Like, we all know any woman walks out of the house. I'm talking this as an indigenous person that comes from the forest. We treat every vegetation as food. We have the indigenous vegetables, we have the indigenous seeds that we are trying so much to preserve because they are getting extinct the more we continue going the organic way. Like, we must preserve these seeds. We must preserve anything that we believe is indigenous. And also, okay, our way of life changed. Like I said before, we were evicted from our ancestral home. We have been placed outside the forest, and now we stopped being hunter-gatherers, because if you're outside the forest, you cannot continue with your way of life. So what happens? We are adopting to organic farming, like trying as much as we can to not try use chemicals in our farming. So this goes back to creating compost manures so that we use them in our farmings. We also have people, I know there's a community known as Ogiek here in Kenya that has it's called a seed savers plant, where they are trying so much to conserve all the indigenous seeds that are available so that we can always get them generation after generation. Looking back also at some of the activities that we have been doing, like we are processing and packaging honey at the grassroots level. These are some of the activities that have zero disturbance to the forest, because we just collect honey from the trees. We don't process in any way. We just sieve the honey and package the honey, sell it in its raw form so that people can use it for medicinal values. And we are doing this so that we encourage people to conserve the forest and try as much as they can to do reforestation where trees have been cut down. There is an issue that came up some time back where, when the community was evicted from the forest, there was no one to guard the trees, because every indigenous person believes that a tree is like a small god. We worship it because this tree has so much value to us. From a tree, you will get firewood. From a tree, you will get medicine. From a tree, we can set up a beehive and we get honey. So when we moved out of the forest, other people went into the forest and they started cutting down trees and burning charcoal. And it was so wrong because the indigenous communities really have this relationship with the forest where they believe cutting down a tree is a taboo. And when people cut down trees, that is when we start having the effects of climate change. We start having landslide. We start having water reducing in some lakes because we expect trees to attract rain and rain to fall and then we get water. But when we cut down tree, that is when we even start getting the different weather patterns where we ask ourselves what happened. I believe we, the indigenous people, know what really happened. We are the custodians of the traditional knowledge. We understand what a forest needs. We understand what the environment needs. So every time I have engaged with the women, every time I have attended meetings, we have always been advocating for, first, having women in decision-making tables, decision-making processes, so that a woman will come and advise you accordingly, because we are so knowledgeable. We have a lot in us that I believe we have not been given that space to just talk about it. Like, what do we know as women? So my belief is that we give more women space in the decision-making processes so that they can express themselves, come with their indigenous knowledge, tell us, for you to avoid having drought at this period, this is what you are supposed to do. For you to avoid having floods, this is what you're supposed to do. Yeah. So those are some of the recommendations that I always feel, even not necessarily in Kenya, but even in the outside countries, we advocate for women in leadership, because women, we are the backbone of the societies. That is all I can say. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Winnie. Well, for being all that you can say, you said a tremendous amount. Thank you so much. I love that you're advocating for, and what you're working on most is understanding that women need to be in decision-making spaces. And I know a lot of the organizations that are on the call today, that is the charge. I know for Peak Institute, that's one of the main issues that we work on at the United Nations, making sure that people like yourself have access to and are at that table. And I think that's such important work. And as we continue to hold these conversations, making sure that we also, and the organizations that are here and that have, when we have access, that we are giving it to those who need it. So I think that's a charge I will put out to our lovely fellow organizers and organizations on this call, that when you have an opportunity and you're at the UN, one of the things that I love to do when those meetings are happening again is, instead of me speaking, I push either my students or activists forward. And I would encourage my fellow organizations to do the same. When you have the opportunity to speak at the UN, it's very exciting as the executive director to do so, but I do it myself, and I encourage all of you, give your speaking space to an Indigenous or a Black or Brown person. I'm really tired of seeing all of these white people speaking all the time. It needs to be Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks. And as we've been saying, these are the people who have the knowledge. So I'll get off my soapbox and bring it back to everybody here. Next on our list, so we were in Africa, we're going to go visit Argentina. So Miriam, same question for you.
Estábamos en el Recuérdame la pregunta bien, me concentré. Rebeca.
Absolutely. So as you were hearing everyone speaking, are there traditions or things that are happening in your region that you think could translate to another region of the world, or vice versa, something that someone spoke about that you feel like maybe you could bring to Argentina to help with the issues that you mentioned for climate change, and also looking at how to
Bueno, la verdad que
help
lo que han
women?
mencionado todos los hermanos es el conocimiento que tenemos todos los pueblos. Nosotros sabemos muy bien que las prácticas que tenemos como pueblo no serían otras, si no, no seríamos pueblos originarios. ¿Por qué? Porque la relación, como decía Esther, que tenemos con la Madre Tierra, como ya lo mencionó el hermano Strong, como lo mencionó Winnie, están apegadas, digamos, nosotros no existimos si no es con ese entorno, porque somos parte de ese entorno. Y entonces, cuando nosotros explicamos que podemos hablar con el agua, que podemos hablar con los árboles, nos miran como que es una cuestión extraña, ¿no? Y entonces, para nosotros es común, es natural esa relación que tenemos con la naturaleza. Entonces, ese es el kit de la cuestión, diríamos nosotros, es la parte neurálgica esencial de que nos mantiene vivo por esa relación hermosa que tenemos con nuestra Madre Tierra. Y las prácticas son las mismas, el resguardo del conocimiento, el cuidado de la tierra, el cuidado de la relación con los árboles, el cuidado de no contaminar el agua. Entonces, esa sabiduría es la que nos mantiene en pie y es la que resguardamos porque estamos llamados a resguardar esa sabiduría. Estamos llamados mucho más en este tiempo de contaminación. No, nosotros nos duele cuando violan a nuestra madre tierra con el fracking. Estamos sabiendo y siendo conscientes de que están metiendo muchísima cantidad de contaminantes a las placas tectónicas de la tierra y que esa violación que hacen a la tierra va a quedar de generación en generación y que muchas veces no se va a reparar. Ahora, creemos en las fuerzas y en las energías universales, como decía la hermana Esther, creemos en nuestras fuerzas propias como pueblos originarios, de que va a suceder ese portal o ese paradigma que tenemos que trascender como humanidad. Hoy ya no solo es los pueblos originarios, sino es toda la humanidad. Y estamos en este día reunidos en un contexto de pandemia, en donde todo el mundo está sufriendo muertes por centenares, en donde hay casi toda una humanidad encerrada en sus casas para no contagiarse. Entonces nos preguntamos, ¿ha resultado el sistema que se ha aplicado hasta hoy en día? El sistema capitalista depredador, ¿qué resultado ha tenido? ¿Qué resultado en contraposición con las filosofías de los pueblos originarios? Imagínense, yo les quería pasar un dato importante, que nosotros somos el 6,2% de la población mundial, los cuales el 22% ocupamos el 22% de la tierra global y cuidamos el 80% de la biodiversidad. Si nosotros no existiéramos en la Tierra ya estaría en un caos total. Porque ¿saben por qué estar salvándose de que no haya más catástrofe? Porque todavía estamos vivos. Y porque estamos vivos, estamos cuidando la Madre Tierra. Cuidamos grandes extensiones de pulmones, como son los bosques nativos. Cuidamos que ese equilibrio siga siendo para dar oxígeno, para dar vida al planeta. ¿Y qué sucede con esa gran misión que cumplen los pueblos originarios? Después de 528 años que han venido a saquear a esta tierra, todavía siguen saqueándonos. Todavía talan nuestros árboles. Y aquel que defiende todavía es muerto. Hemos tenido en esta pandemia vergonzosamente muchos hermanos muertos, no solo por la pandemia, sino por cuidar su territorio. En Brasil, en Colombia, en Perú, en Chile y en Argentina estamos viviendo el fenómeno de quemas de extensiones de tierra y territorio, que a veces dicen que es por sequía y otra vez intencional, para sembrar grandes cantidades de soja, para traer esas semillas que ellos quieren. Muchos quedaron encerrados, pero las grandes corporaciones no se encerraron. Aprovecharon el contexto de COVID para ir por nuestros territorios y para ir por las vidas de nuestros hermanos que todavía decimos basta al terricidio, basta a que nos roben las tierras, basta a que violen la vida de los territorios indígenas. Entonces, por supuesto que la resistencia la tenemos. Hoy es 12 de octubre, Día de Resistencia Indígena, y estamos demostrando que vamos a seguir resistiendo a este sistema capitalista, porque está en peligro no solo la vida de los pueblos originarios, sino la vida de la humanidad. ¿Y cuál es el propósito de vivir? ¿Cuál es el propósito de ser humano? Sino dejar una tierra hermosa para los que vienen y para las generaciones que van a trascender. Toda esta sabiduría está en todo cualquiera de los hermanos que ustedes invitaron hoy. Y nosotros nos escuchamos, celebramos la palabra y somos orgullosamente indígenas y recuperamos esta vida no solo para nosotros y nuestros hijos, sino para toda la humanidad.
Thank you so much, Miriam. And thank you for detailing what's been happening. And I heard you speak again about fracking. I guess I was assuming that that was something that was happening here in the United States, but it sounds like it's also happening in South America, probably around the world. But I heard you speak about communing with nature, and I really loved how you started this section when you're talking about being in relationship with and being able to talk with the trees and the water and what that really means, being in communion with and in communication with everything that is around us. And as we work on being able to communicate more deeply with one another around the world, at the same time, really necessary to also work on our ways of communicating with the earth. And I think that for us, the biggest piece will be listening. I think the planet is telling us many, many things, and we are not at all listening. So I'm going to kick it over to Strong Buffalo for our last section, and then there are a few questions that have come through. But yeah, so much to think about. So thank you so much, Miriam. And Strong Buffalo in Minnesota, you're gonna finish our panel for today. So same question to you. From what the other panelists were speaking about, is there anything that they brought up that you feel you could bring to the northern part of the US as far as tactics, or vice versa? Is there something that you're doing in Minnesota that you feel like could be shared to these other regions?
Well, last century I had the honor of helping to write the Declaration of Indigenous Peoples. It was finally accepted here in the United States, which was the last one with a disclaimer that they would only sign it if they wouldn't admit to genocide. Which means they did commit genocide. And here on Indigenous Day in 2020, I'm proud to be Indigenous. And what I do is because my people would go to the highest points or the loneliest spots and fast and seek communication with the unknown, is I write. I write and I speak. So I'm going to read a couple poems. This one I called Some. Some can, some don't, some can't. Some could, some do sometimes. Some never will in this land of the United States of America. All is never, always is some. But in sight of the simple majority of privilege rule, not of the alt-right or the radical left, but some in the middle of it all, or some excluded altogether. But some are dreamers, some are doers, some take action, some don't care, almost anything at all. Some do care, and for those some, I propose the some to make a society not organized or a structure by any means at all, but for those who love Mother Earth enough to act, speak, advocate, and work to stop the devastating pollution and destruction of Mother Earth and all of life. Some of me, some of you. I call it the Society of Mother Earth, the SOME, or the SOME. Yesterday I had the privilege of participating in a performance in front of the Minnesota State Capitol at an event called the Tree of Peace, the Tree of Life, the Tree for the Future. I wrote this along with my friend Ben Weaver. I called it Us, the Trees and Leaves. Under the darkened pandemic sun, as the wildfires are burning us and the sparks of social justice are ablaze, we find ourselves, but we are all broken spirits from the arid past, just falling leaves, just motionless human trees, lost and confused, fluttering. Even the best of us is full of questionable doubt. Yet it always changes when we see the spring bloom again. For each season of life renews. After us, same as before us, and same as now. We, trees and leaves, alive and strong, even in our weakened world. Less than before, we shake, we fall, we cry, we wither. But relatives, within our family of air, water, land, and life, we must love being ourselves and share with each other and know that we are the glorious and wonderful trees and leaves who breathe and give the good air and cool shade from this pending heat. Our roots are deep, our seeds are strong, our limbs are good. Our great purpose is full of compassionate love. Even when we fall, for we will always return until the end of times. We shall always be the beautiful trees and leaves standing up for what is right. I'm so proud to be Indigenous here on Indigenous Day, and let's save the world.
Thank you so much for sharing your art and poetry with us today. So beautiful. It's very moving, and I love the poem you called it Us, and we are the trees. It's very, very special. Thank you. I'm feeling very, very honored to be able to hear that and share that with the world today. So beautiful. So I think that's such an amazing and heartfelt way to end our panel today. I didn't know that that was going to happen, so those synchronicities make me really, really excited and very happy. So I appreciate and honor all of you for joining us today. We do have some questions that have come through. So with our last about 15-20 minutes, we'll get through some of these questions. Some are to the whole panel and some are specific to certain panelists. The first one, I'm going to ask to everyone if we could limit our answers to 1 to 2 minutes so that we can get through all of the Q&A. So our first question, it's anonymous. Let me find it. Where did you go? Okay, so I'm not sure which panelist or which attendee asked this, but they would like to know, they agree that the most important thing that we can be doing is to get to know each other, be united, and cooperate in the fight against climate change. How do we make this common fight real or concrete? So I'm going to throw this to everyone. And again, if we could give our answer in like 1 to 2 minutes, and then we'll get on to the next one. So I'm going to go across my screen. We'll start with Winnie, Strong Buffalo, Miriam, and then Esther. Okay. So Winnie, take it away.
Oh, hi, before you mute, maybe repeat the question, please.
Absolutely, no problem. So the idea, this attendee agrees that connecting is super important. And if we're going to fight climate change, that we need to be connected. So they were asking, how do we make this real and concrete? How do we connect all together and bring this fight forward?
Thank you for that. I think my first answer is always have strong collaborations across. Like if it's an issue in Africa, someone in America can pick it. If it's an issue in America, someone in Africa can pick it. So that maybe we have collaborative campaigns, online campaigns. I believe they work so well because COVID has taught us that so many things can be done online. So maybe have joint advocacy campaigns towards climate change, addressing the same issues. The issues in Africa might not be the same in America or South, but just talking about climate change, I address issues in Africa, someone else does that, so that we have joint advocacy campaigns. We can write joint statements together as different countries and then sign them. Yeah, I think that is one way of networking that I always think of.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Next, we'll move on to Strong Buffalo. Same question.
I think we need to reach out to each other. We need to talk and visit with each other. We need to become relatives. We need to become friends. We need to know each other. And we have to be real. And I think by sharing and being real and honest and compassionate, we can do good things. So that's what my suggestion was: be real.
Excellent. Be real. I love it. And Miriam. Miriam, we can't hear you. You're still muted.
Lo que ha dicho el hermano hermoso, ¿no? Ser auténtico, como dijo Wendy, crear esas redes de conexión, pero sobre todo yo creo que tenemos que hacer alianzas estratégicas, porque he visto, he celebrado a fin de año, noviembre, tuve que ir a Chile en una misión de paz por los conflictos que había en Chile, y me he puesto muy contenta de ver tantos jóvenes comprometidos, no solo en una alianza estratégica con la lucha mapuche indígena, pero ya pidiendo, se hartaron de que no cumplan las leyes, se hartaron del gobierno que les prometía cosas, hasta que esas luchas los juntó a la lucha indígena con la lucha de los jóvenes que estaban pidiendo los derechos, derecho a una educación gratuita, derecho a que los ancianos tuvieran sus asistencias. Entonces, como decía el hermano Strong, ser una familia, focalizar esas personas que resuenan con nosotros, esas personas que vibran en la misma sintonía y que son justos, que están luchando por justicia de sentido común, porque las cosas son más simples. Si no nos complican, las complican ellos. Es el sistema
Who has
capitalista
gone for my
que cree
question?
solo plata. Entonces, en las cosas simples, en las estrategias, con esas personas que resuenan, tenemos que juntarnos. Entonces, por eso yo estoy en una central de trabajadores, que hay trabajadores, que hacen pueblos originarios con trabajadores. Son alianzas estratégicas para visibilizar la lucha e ir por más. Hoy tenemos que hacerla, es un deber. Así que buena intención, justicia y alianzas con aquellos que resuenan con nosotros.
Thank you so much, Miriam, and absolutely building strong alliances. And actually, the way that all of this came about was through another coalition and alliance building workshop that we did in the beginning of the year. So I know I saw a question, and I'll answer this quickly, but yes, the fruits of labor like this is that as we meet more people and we stay connected, we're able to bring people together like this. So just in January, I would not have imagined that we would have such a panel of amazing people from where we started. But to the professor, yes, it's so important. I'm sorry, Professor Abbas. This type of work, there's no quick way to do it. We have to connect with each other, and it starts with relationship building. And I will bring it over to Esther to answer the last panelist to answer this question. Thank you.
I believe one of the things that we need to learn how to do, all of us as human beings, as in Dene, we are all children of the universe. And I think that no matter what level of education, the complexity of education, scientific, engineering, whatever, that we all have to be human. We all have to come back to humanity. And to come back to humanity means to go outside and feel the air and feel the earth and reach up into the heavens and ask them for guidance. Ask them to assist us in making a way to make this happen for us. And I'm very appreciative and thankful to be a part of the panel, to be able to say this to everybody, because I don't speak for myself. The words that come out of my mouth is all the Creator's words. It's not me. The Creator speaks through me. And I always ask the Creator to speak through me by going out every morning and greeting the sun and the awakening of a new day and new life. So I believe the answers are being human and knowing what love is, knowing what respect is, humility is, and appreciating and being thankful. That's my belief in. I don't care how high of a level of education you've climbed that ladder. Got to come down here. The people are on the ground.
Amen, Esther. I love that so much. One of the big things I advocate for is, especially when we're talking about young people and getting young people involved, a lot of people use the acronym student or college student, and I am constantly advocating for the fact that how much education level you have, actually the higher level of education you have, it's probably a lot more difficult for you to have the conversations that need to happen. I won't say like it's not expensive, but we're across the board. But I think, as you said, it's so incredibly important for us as a society to start understanding that what happens inside the university, that's not real life. Studying education, I have an education nonprofit. I'm not advocating against education. What I'm advocating for is getting out of the university, getting out of the classroom, applied, put it into practice, put it into the earth. And more than anything, talk to people you don't know, talk to people you don't think that you like, talk to everyone. But thank you, Esther. Yes, I'm so happy that you brought that point up. All right, so with our last few minutes, I do have, so Strong Buffalo, your poetry has made a huge hit with our audience. And this is a specific question for you, and people would like to know if your poems are published, and if so, where they can purchase a book. And if not, maybe think about that, because they've got lots of people who want to buy it.
Yes, I have some chapbooks out. You can go to our website at Oyate Otanen. It's like spelled like OYATEHOTANIN.org. Yeah, it's I've been writing for over 50 years, so it's good that people are finally hearing it. Thank you very much.
That's amazing. And I'll get in touch with you, and we'll make sure that we link to your website and where people can purchase books. So this entire broadcast will be on our website, and we'll have it posted and make sure that people have access to your poetry. Excellent. All right. And our next question comes from Roslyn. Thanks for joining us today, Roslyn. And she would like to know if there are any networks or allies that campaign. So this question is specifically for Miriam. So Roslyn would like to know if there are any networks or campaigns that you work with globally that help you protect the forest. So she's asking specifically about the soybean planting and what's happening right now with the forest. Are there any groups or communities that you're working with globally to work on that?
A nivel internacional estamos, digamos, como conectados con las mismas organizaciones indígenas. Siempre hacemos alianzas estratégicas de organizaciones, sobre todo las que tienen conflictos con el tema del avance sobre sus territorios, ¿no? Y yo dejo después mi mail, y entonces las personas que necesiten conectarse los puedo conectar. Mi mail, no sé, lo tienen ustedes ahí el mail, pero se lo paso si no. liempemiriam25@gmail.com.ar, y allí yo le daría las alianzas. Y sí, estamos conectados con mucho activismo con respecto a los jóvenes también, las alianzas estratégicas que tienen que ver con nuevos paradigmas de vida, sobre todo en esto del no al agrotóxico, no a los transgénicos, y cómo la sabiduría ancestral de resguardar los territorios con toda su biodiversidad puede ser transmitida, porque hay mucha nueva humanidad de todas las edades que está queriendo cambiar el paradigma de vida. Sobre todo se aceleró en este contexto de COVID, e incluso aquí mismo en la Argentina se están formando en la región, en Uruguay, en otros lugares, ecoaldeas, en donde los jóvenes están creando un paradigma diferente, como diciendo, no queremos, vamos a acompañar esta otra mirada y queremos aprender. Y esa disposición de aprender hace que se conecten con los pueblos originarios. Y nosotros estamos haciendo ese puente. Y estamos viviendo una experiencia maravillosa, aún en el contexto de COVID, por las consultas que tenemos sobre diferentes formas, ¿no?, que quieren adoptar los jóvenes y estar en resonancia con el planeta. Así que eso es una experiencia muy linda que comparto.
Miriam, thank you so much. And a huge, huge thank you to all of our panelists. We're coming up to the end of our time here. And if I could ask the panelists just to stay for one moment after we finish so we can take a group photo, which we'll send to everyone. And for all of our attendees, thank you so much for spending your morning, evening, or afternoon with us. We are so honored to be here and to bring you panels like this. Please consider supporting our network. We are putting on webinars like this every other month because we think it's so incredibly important to continue to speak with and engage with those at the front lines for climate change. So again, I'm just so honored to have our panelists here and to bring this programming to everyone. So thank you all so much. We're clear, okay. And if one of my amazing co-hosts could tell me how I end this without kicking everyone off. Or is that, Emily, is that
I don't know if that's possible.
okay.
I think as people just dwindle off, that's all we can do.
Okay.
If you hit leave,
Then
like
it closes for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so to our attendees, you get to see our picture. I'm going to put all of us on the screen for a gallery. So we're all here. Wonderful. Here you all come. Christian, we can't see you. We need light on your face.
He's got some pretty plants, though.
I know. I was just going to say, I love the plants. It's beautiful. Excellent. So if we're all ready, let me clear this chat. All right. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. All right. I'm going to send this to everyone. Again, we're going to put, if there's any information that you want to share with people, please send it to me or to your contact. And we'll make sure to link on our website to anything that you'd like to share. And again, I'm just so, so excited and honored that you all are here. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thanks. Yeah. Yes. So
Thank you.
Thank you, interpreters. You guys were absolutely amazing.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Oh, I never put our
Yeah.
save the date up. Shoot.
We'll share it on Twitter and everything now.
Thank you for making that, Emma. I'm sorry I didn't get it up.
It's okay.
Yes, awesome. We'll be in touch soon and get ready for our next one. I know.
Great job.
Thanks. Bye.